Okay, so welcome to the second episode of this engine repair. And on this episode, we will continue the process of taking the intake manifold out. Now, quick little thing I should add. Some of you may notice that this does look a little bit different than where the first episode led off. And that is because all of the wires that went into the engine overhead harness I have disconnected, ranging from the throttle body connector all the way down to the alternator wire. Everything had to be taken off in order to get this whole harness off so that you can take the manifold off. And another little thing I should add is that these wires are not permanent. They are not grounded into the actual car, and they were just there so that I could start the car and get it out of from where it was parked. And along with that, yes, the engine does turn over, does start, but not very well. The whole purpose of this repair is to get it to a better working state rather than from a non-running state. This is what the engine sounds like for any kind of repair or any kind of fix being done to it. As you can tell, not very good, and there is a lot of whining noise and a lot of problems on the engine. And so, with that, this episode we will start off by taking the mounting brackets for this area over here off, the Valvetronic motors, and then taking this little wiring harness, whatever it is, putting it over there, and then starting to disconnect the fuel rails if needed to take the whole intake manifold off. And so with that, let's start. Alright, so to take this harness off, there are 4 bolts, 2 up here and then 2 down here. Yeah, 2 down here. And both of them are, or all 4 of them, are a T30 kind of bit. And with those 2 removed, this bracket comes off. This is the mounting bracket for the engine cover, and I need to order another one as that side did not have one. Then there are the 2 mounting bolts for the wiring harness. That one is now on the floor, hopefully. But here is the bracket, and here is what the bolts look like. And so, now with those 2 removed, we can get on to removing the Valvetronic motors. These have 2 clips on top of them that you remove as such. Push on both sides and then pull up, and it comes out. Super simple. Then once you get those disconnected, there is I'm using a 5/32 bolt, a hexagonal bit, to take out the 4 mounting bolts along the Valvetronic motor. Now a quick little thing is, take 2 of them out first and then work the other 2 out, as the Valvetronic motor, if you take all of them except the 1 out, it will rocket out of this little hole as there is a spring inside. You want to avoid that, as doing so can destroy the Valvetronic actual actuator and can be very annoying to replace, as this is $70. So, now that I have those two out, I will begin to work the Valvetronic motor out of its little hole by just simply going back and forth between these two bolts. Another important note to add, you do this so that you don't bend the plate that it's on, as the spring inside of it is quite strong, and if you only have one bolt on it, it is incredibly easy to bend the mounting plate. So now that I have only one bolt loosely fitted in there, I will slowly take it out while holding the motor, and just like that, it comes out. Okay, so scratch that last little statement. There are, I guess, wires I forgot about at the back of the engine, and try as I might, I can't seem to get them out with the current with the current state of the engine. So I'm instead going to move on to taking the throttle body and the fuel rails out. Now the throttle body has 4 10mm bolts all around it, and they aren't put on super tight, but it is still enough to keep it on there. And these are what the bolts look like. And then it comes off just like that. There is this little plastic thing on here, but it doesn't seem to be connected to anything other than just the throttle body. Okay, so now that the throttle body is off, the next step I'm going to take is disconnecting the fuel rail, which has 2 8mm bolts that are holding the wires onto the main rail, and then from what I can tell, 2 on each side T25 star bolts. Here are the 8mm, fairly small. Now, once you do that, this wire's mounting should, have a little bit of wiggle room. Then, after that, you need to take 2 T25 bolts, two T25 bolts out of their little mounts. really tight. And here's what those look like. Now, once you get those two out, each fuel injector has its own separate plug, which needs to come out. Once you get those out, then the fuel rail, at least on this side, should be able to move. Alright, so a little correction about the last clip. The connectors onto the actual fuel injectors do not need to come out. Neither do the 8mm. I guess just the T25s need to come out and the whole fuel rail will move out of the way. But regardless, now that that's out of the way, we now have enough-ish room to get the intake manifold out, which will give me enough room to take those back wires out to get this harness out, or at least moved over to the side. Alright, so now that all of that has been taken off and there's all this extra stuff over here, there is then a vacuum line on the bottom of the intake manifold you want to take off. Not very visible on camera, but this line you need to take off. And then there are 10 or so 11mm bolts that you need to take off, and then once you take those off, the intake manifold should come out. I say should because so far there's been random plugs that I didn't think were there this whole disassembly. So, do be warned, there might be more. They're not supposed to be this loose. Whoever took this out for me, I guess, did not tighten all of these all the way down. And there is one over there, actually, that is just not even there. But here are the 10 11mm bolts you're going to be taking out. Okay, so I know I kind of missed the moment, but the intake manifold, once I got those 10 bolts off, did come out. And there are a lot of wires on this engine. All of them are not wanting to cooperate. But on the back of it are the wires that I was not able to get out. Which now they're much easier to get out. Alright, so then with that, now that the intake manifold is off, and we can see the rest of this, once I get those actually disconnected, the next step is to either, oh boy, sorry, the intake manifold isn't heavy, it weighs like 5 pounds, but there are so many little wires, so many little other things on this. But now the next step is to take the valve covers off or to pressure test the coolant system to check if there is a leak in here or, in the worst case, on the back of the engine, which I pray that it is not that, as if it is that, that is an extremely long fix. Alright, so I got the wires disconnected, and it was these three on the back that were being a pain to get out. But now that I have those out, this is what the intake manifold looks like, all by itself. This will need to be cleaned both outside and probably inside, but with it out, now the next major step is to either get that final, hopefully final, wire disconnected so this can be moved out of the way, or just deal with it and leave it here. Then once you do that, in order to get down into the coolant transfer pipe, which is usually an issue for these cars, there are a number of bolts all around the coolant valley pan, I think is what it's called. And before you do that, there's also this very long and very annoying, from what I remember, coolant pipe that also needs to be removed. Alright, so thank you for watching, and like and subscribe for more of this video for more of these kinds of videos on how to not incorrectly, but also not properly, remove and take out these all kinds of different parts for this engine. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.